Hey guys, today I'm going to be talking about just Yu-Gi-Oh in general as a newer player. So, if you just start playing Yu-Gi-Oh, right? Immediately, the first thing you're going to do is probably look at a card. And if we look at, for example, we have Dark Simorgh here. What can we learn about Dark Simorgh? Assuming we have no help, right? So, no tutorial at this point yet. So we see clearly the card has a name. This doesn't tell us much. We see it saying dark up here. Does this mean much to us? I mean, no, not really. There's 7 stars, so big stars equal good. Maybe. Not very clear. This doesn't mean anything. Cool art, I guess. What are those? Like, hmm, kind of hard to say. Then we have whatever that is. So that sure is a card art. And then we have clearly it's saying winged beast here slash effect. Still means nothing to us. And then we have all this text. While face up on the field, this card is also wind attribute. If this card is in your hand, you can banish one dark and one wind monster from your graveyard. Special summon this card. If this card is in your graveyard, you can banish one dark and one wind monster from your hand. Special summon this card. Your opponent cannot set cards. So after reading all of this, while face up on the field, what is the field? I guess you can assume it's like the playing field, right? As a newer player, you would assume that much. This card is also wind attribute. I guess you probably can assume they're like elemental attributes based on just this, right? And then it says you can banish one dark and one wind monster from your graveyard to special summon this card. So once again, pretty simple to assume, but also, what does GY mean? GY, not very clear. Also, you might have skimmed over it, but some of this punctuation actually does matter, like the semicolon and the colon, like semicolon here, colon here. What do those mean? You probably didn't even think about that, right? As a newer player, so that doesn't particularly mean anything to you, and you probably won't realize that this actually means something for quite a while. So then it says if this card is in your graveyard, you can banish one dark and one wind monster from your hand. Special summon this card. Your opponent cannot set cards. So your opponent can not set cards. All of the text on this, is there anything like very legible here? Yeah, I don't think so. So you're probably vaguely aware that you have to banish 2 monsters and then you can special summon this card from the hand. But it does not say you cannot normal summon this card. So do you think a new player might be confused as to why they can't just normal summon Dark Simorgh? I mean, of course. Uh, a newer player is probably not aware of if they're able to normal summon a card or not. Like, and it's based on the stars here. That is something a newer player probably just is not going to be aware of. This is granted one of the few things that's somewhat useful that I think is taught in the tutorial. I would have to double check because if it's not, that'd be like a tremendous fuck up, right? Not much to say about that, but okay. Aside from that, we have attack and defense points. So what can we glean from this card here? Attack and defense. So attack and defense, it wouldn't be clear as a newer player. Like, assuming you know nothing about Yu-Gi-Oh, you just start it up like Master Duel. First thing you do, read Dark Simorgh. Okay. Now we have 2,700 attack. What does this mean? Does that mean if we attack into a monster with like less defense, it will instantly get destroyed? Is this like a monster's life or something? Uh, yeah, what do these mean? Oh, we have attack and defense position, then you have to explain that as well. So as you can see here, we have just off of looking at one card, so many things to explain, right? The first thing that's clearly apparent that is not going to be understood by any new player is going to be Yu-Gi-Oh's chains and also how to read the card straight up. Like, no new player will be able to read a card and understand what it does because of how problem-solving card text works, like all of that stuff. A newer player would never know, and specifically in Master Duel, they're not explaining this, right? In the tutorial, right? not explained in the slightest, so that's actually a problem. So someone tell me where in the tutorial it explains that if we have a colon here, this means the effect starts a chain, and also how would a newer player know what a chain is? Okay, so you have to kind of explain chains first, maybe? Sure. And then we have you can bash a dark and one wind monster from your graveyard. So we have the semicolon here. So semicolon denotes cost. But okay, let's put this in here for a second. And then we'll go to Dark Grepher. So if we do Dark Grepher has essentially a cost type effect. You can special summon this card from your hand by discarding one level 5 or higher dark monster. This one does not have a semicolon, right? So this effect is actually an inherent summon, yeah. So it just doesn't even start a chain being inherent. This effect here, it is also like being written like this. So it's if this card is in your hand and then it's a colon, then you can banish one dark and one wind monster from your graveyard. Semicolon, special summon this card. So we have that now. And this one is formatted the same, but I do recall there are actually effects where there's just like a semicolon and no colon, and it still starts a chain. Is that going to be made apparent anywhere? I mean, not really. I don't think. Well, I don't think I've read any documentation that mentions this. I just ended up figuring it out because I play on simulator, and if that's how it consistently works, I guess it just works that way. So that's convenient at least. And then this clearly has no colons or semicolons, so this is just a continuous effect. And then, of course, like, they're continuous effects, uh, and then technically, like, I guess, activated effects, ignition effects, trigger effects, quick effects. That's not going to be easy to explain here, right? So this has two ignition effects, one continuous effect here, and then this is technically also a continuous effect. This is not like necessarily an attribute of the card, meaning you can negate this effect technically, I guess, right? So that's cool. And then if we go to more and more cards, there are a bunch of different terms that we use for a lot of things in Yu-Gi-Oh! So we have like discard, banish, graveyard, uh, banished, return, sent to the graveyard, send to the graveyard, and so on and so forth, right? So each of those different terms have to be individually explained, and they're not like super clear cut or obvious for like everyone. Some of these might be a little bit more intuitive than others. Like if we have a card that says it can't be destroyed, you can send it to the graveyard still, because that's not destroying technically. And Yu-Gi-Oh is basically built on that kind of foundation where a card says this, it gets to the same location as the trigger, but technically it was not sent in the specific way it said on the card. So technically it does not trigger, and therefore it does not trigger, right? So what one kind of interesting example we can kind of use is let's say we have, I don't know, is this what we're looking for? Snake Eye. What does this say? No. This isn't one of those kinds of cards, so original Sinful Spoils is kind of just somewhat busted, I guess. Let's see. If this card was sent to the graveyard, except let's see. During your main phase, except the turn this card was sent to the graveyard, you can banish this card from your graveyard to target one machine monster in your graveyard, send one Jitsu monster from your deck to the graveyard. If you do, add that targeted monster to your hand. So we don't really care about the effect that much. We just care that it says you can't use this during the turn this card was sent to the graveyard. And then it just lists the effects, right? So we have a good few effects like that, so we could even go grab Sheer Noise Spectral Sword. So sent to the graveyard means something very specific. So if a card was destroyed, that counts as sent to the graveyard. If it is literally sent to the graveyard, it is sent to the graveyard. If it is discarded from the hand, it counts as sent to the graveyard. If it is sent from deck by whatever type of effect, essentially then sent to the graveyard. But if we were to instead banish a card and then return it to the graveyard, so this is different. If we return a card to the graveyard with, for example, Cyframe Lord Omega, the card was not sent to the graveyard actually. Instead, it was returned to the graveyard, which is completely different, allowing you to activate like this type of graveyard effect. But this is never like in general super relevant, so doubt you would figure this out. And then in turn, this would also mean something like, say we have Sharon, I guess, because Sharon specifically says sent to the graveyard on it by card effect, I believe, right? Let's see. If this card is sent to the graveyard by card effect, this means if you were to return Sharon, it seems like it won't trigger, I guess. If you were to return it with Cyframe Lord Omega. So that's kind of relevant if this ever does come up. Couldn't really come up that often, but yeah, you wouldn't be able to trigger Sharon effect to special summon into, well, special summon a Kikalos or fusion summon into a Kikalos or whatever, right? That is not going to happen. Same with Rhino Heart's effect to special summon, I guess. This will not trigger any tier limit effects, essentially, if you return them to the graveyard, which is just kind of funky in general. But like, if we go back all the way, what would we know about any of these cards? Absolutely nothing as a new player. It's pretty much unreasonable to know anything. So every single value on these cards, not very clear, and you wouldn't be able to tell what you can and can't do with the cards. You would need to read through like an insane amount of documentation. And even if we just straight up ignore all of these factors like attribute, type, effect monster, non-effect monster, uh, attack points, defense points, a monster's level, just straight up ignore all of it, okay? You still wouldn't be able to read the card effects, which is the primary thing about Yu-Gi-Oh, right? This is arguably one of the most important things about Yu-Gi-Oh, and makes Yu-Gi-Oh Yu-Gi-Oh, right? It's just essentially the card effects and how they work. But before we can even care about what the card effects do, we can't even read what they do. Just straight up. And this is not going to be in any tutorial anywhere, which is just kind of dumb, no? So if we just go through the tutorial, we wouldn't really be able to figure out what, for example, a Dark Griffer does. And of course, we're not going to bother like going over something like, oh, but pendulum cards, they're so complicated. They have so much text. Who cares what text they have, bro? Like, even if you have relatively short text, like, I don't know, literally 3 lines of text or something like that, like, I don't know, something like this, like Vanity's Ruler. A newer player probably can't figure out exactly what this card does, like, cannot be special summoned. Okay, what does special summoned even mean? Well, that's a great starting point, isn't it? And then if we go into like another different card, we could even just go to Mystic Space Typhoon, I guess, right? So MST. Target 1, spell trap on the field. That is cost, destroy that target. Effect. Okay. But what the hell does this do? What? Well, target and cards that don't mention target, a newer player is probably not going to notice the difference. So if there was a card that says destroy just straight up a spell trap on the field versus MST's target 1 spell trap on the field, destroy that target, who's going to know the difference? And then we have like more inherent effects that Most people wouldn't understand. Like we have Kelly Yuga. So we have DDD, Duodon King, Kelly Yuga here. And we have this line, which is pretty interesting. After this card is XYZ summoned for the rest of this turn, other cards and their effects cannot be activated on the field, and other card effects on the field are negated. This does not start a chain. So, you can see clearly, no semicolon, no colon. No chain. So the only way to prevent this effect from happening is to stop the XYZ summon in the first place. So you would have to, like, do a solemn judgment. If you were to try to negate this, it ain't happening, Chief. Unless it's something like a skill drain, in which case that would technically work. I think. Yes, probably. And, well, it should work like that. If it doesn't work, that feels like a bug to me. So, yeah. Small amount of confusing confusion. So, if someone tried to special summon a Kali Yuga, there's a good chance you would attempt to activate something. So, notably, other cards and their effects cannot be activated on the field, and other cards' effects on the field are negated because of how this card works, right? If this card hits the field and you have Imperm on the field, you cannot even Imperm Kali Yuga. Like, attempting to do so, you can't, okay? Their effects cannot be activated on the field. And other cards' effects on the field are negated. So, with this wording here, this means something already on the field cannot be activated, but something not on the field can be activated, right? So if we do Ash Blossom Geospring, legal. If we do activate Raigeki, also legal. It's just not a very good play because it will just get sent directly into the graveyard because it'll be negated. So technically still legal, right? So for Bin Droplet, MST, you can still activate those things as long as they're on in your hand and not on the field, right? If you were to, for example, have Raigeki in hand, set it on the field, you would not be able to activate it, but if we were to just activate it from the hand, we can do that. It's just a matter of why would you? I guess the only reason to do so is if you also have Forbidden Droplet, so we can go chain 1, Raigeki, chain 2, Droplet to just send the Raigeki off the field, so it's not on the field, so if therefore it is not negated. And then boom, destroy your opponent's Kali Yuga and everything else they have on their board. And they probably can't negate this because their own board is also negated, because this doesn't really specify player either, so it just negates essentially everything aside from Kali Yuga. So that's kind of how that works. And this is something a lot of players probably just wouldn't be able to do, and even like I guess like some veteran players, like a good amount of veteran players honestly, would not be able to fully grasp like a card's effect and necessarily all the implications, which is like rough. So if we look at Power Sync Stone versus like for example a skill drain, in some cases actually it's actually significantly more disgusting. Power Sync Stone, that is. The difference between Power Sync Stone and Skill Drain, despite, well, if we don't consider uh, how many copies are legal, Power Sync Stone says that you cannot activate cards, whereas Skill Drain says it will negate monster effects activated on the field. So this already is technically more disgusting, but there's one niche case, I guess, where it would kind of matter, would it? No, it wouldn't. No, I think it is genuinely just a better form of removal. Well, yeah, not better form of removal, but better form of like a monster negate, kinda, right? Well, continuous monster negate. So if you cannot activate an effect, then we wouldn't be able to do the same kind of play with like Kali Yuga, where we do like activate Raigeki, send Droplet. So in this case, we could do activate just any monster effect. So it doesn't matter. Let's say we have an effect to destroy a spell trap. So we do that as a normal summon on a monster. we would be able to activate that against skill drain and then send our monster off the field with just a something. Doesn't matter what, right? And then that would be able to remove skill drain against Power Sync Stone. If we were to do the same thing, we can't even do the first step of activating our monster's effect. Therefore, sending it off the field won't do anything either. So, yeah, that is just miserable, straight up. Yeah? So, next thing on the list, let's see. Okay. So, this is just like straight up. Of course, I've just been talking about reading the cards, but did you guys know the attack and defense values actually do things on these cards? So, I don't think this is mentioned in the tutorial, but if we have two 0 attack monsters and they do battle, what happens? Well, the correct answer is nothing happens, neither is sent to the graveyard. I don't believe that is ever mentioned. But if we were to have like two 100 attack monsters, when they get um, when they attack into each other, they will both be destroyed. Is this mentioned? Well, okay. And then of course we have raid boss. Might as well mention this damage step. So with the damage step, what effects can and cannot be activated, and when can they be activated? Very important, I guess. So if we were to do, let's say, uh, Mirror Force. Let's say we have a Mirror Force here. Then we have Therion Regulus. Can Therion Regulus negate Mirror Force? When an opponent's monster declares an attack, destroy all your opponent's attack position monsters. And then we have this. When your opponent activates a card or effect, quick effect, you can send one Therion monster card from your hand or face a field to the graveyard to negate that effect. So I believe the correct answer is yes, you can negate Mirror Force. Okay. But what if we have a different effect? Let's go with, for example, Sky Striker, Ace, Ray. So if we have Ray now, and we destroy a monster by battle, and that triggers Ray, can we negate with Therian King Regulus? The answer, no. Why? Simple. Well, it seems simple, but who would be aware of this? Well, it's like a you know or you don't know kind of thing, right? It's because Therian King Regulus says negate that effect, okay? Because it says negate that effect, it essentially just doesn't work against things in like the damage step, okay? And this makes your negates essentially matter more, and some certain effects where if you activate them, you should activate them in the damage step, so you just need to properly do that in the simulator, I guess, in which case we have Yu-Gi-Oh here. So gotta be quite clear with this, right? And then we have for example, let's go with Apollosa. Apollosa says, once per chain, when your opponent activates a monster effect, quick effect, you can make this card lose exactly 800 attack, and if you do, negate the activation. Why can Apollosa negate Ray, but Regulus cannot? It is because Therian King Regulus says negate that effect, whereas Apollosa says negate the activation. So this is negating activation, this is negating effect. Uh, Yeah, I don't understand this ruling entirely or like why this works like this, but if your card says negate effect, it doesn't work in the damage step. If we have a card that says negate activation, it does work. So another card that would be a great kind of uh, example with this, I guess, would be um, Evermax. So if we have Crusadia Avramax's effect here, once per battle during the damage calc, if this card battles a special summon monster quick effect, you can make this card gain attack equal to that opponent's monster's attack during that damage calculation only. So This is very hard to deal with because with, for example, a Therian King Regulus, you wouldn't be able to negate the Crusadia Avramax, and you can't attack into it either because it will take Regulus's attack, and Regulus will not be able to respond. So essentially, it will just destroy Regulus by battle, regardless of if your opponent initiates the attack or you initiate the attack. But if we had Apollosa on the field, then Regulus would be able to destroy Crusadia Avramax if they do battle, right? So that would technically work. And then there's also like also worth mentioning is like jank attack rulings and stuff. So Apollosa, I guess, kind of makes sense how this works. The original attack of this card becomes 800 times the number of link materials used for its link summon. So if Apollosa gets negated, like just in general, by like infinite impermanence or effect valor or something like that, Apollosa will just lose all of its negates because it'll have 0 attack because its original attack will not will essentially get negated by the effect because Apollosa gets its original attack from its effect tier, if that makes sense. But if we have like Magnetic Crusadia Avramax and we just adjust its attack but with like a billion different things, like we do a permanent increase attack onto Magnetic Crusadia Avramax, and then there's like a continuous effect decreasing Avramax's attack, and then Avramax's attack just doubles for like a battle phase only. Also trigger uh Magnetic Crusadia Avramax's attack by Avramax's own effect. And then during the end phase or whatever, there's also like an attack increase that's only for the turn. What the hell does Crusadia Avramax's attack become after this turn? No freaking clue because I don't understand those rulings. So we could have made it only 2 factors, and I still would not really understand. So yeah, that's something I would have to research just straight up. And I've been playing the game for a long ass time. Luckily for me though, attack and defense values generally don't matter because still, regardless of whatever Crusadia Abramax's attack is, we could get it done. Yeah. So in general here, what would we know about this game compared to like what we actually need to know to be able to play the game well, or perhaps maybe even the baseline of enjoying the game? So even if we go to the Sword Soul cards, like we would, well, yeah, we would not really be able to easily understand these cards. So these cards, as of currently recording this video, there is uh, a structure deck essentially that you can get. You're just playing Master Duel. You get like a full Sword Soul deck, as far as I know, right? Yeah. Uh, this is not very easy to understand, right? So if we just read this card, if this card is normal or special summon, you can reveal 1 Sword Soul card or 1 Warm monster in your hand. Special summon a Sword Soul token. Warm slash tuner slash water level 4 attack 0 defense 0. While that token is in the monster zone, the player who summoned it cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck except synchro monsters. If this card is sent to the graveyard as synchro material, you can draw 1 card. You can only use each effect of Sword Soul Moi once per turn. So haven't even mentioned hard ones per turns, soft ones per turns, and all that, which is not like super clear. Like when a card just says once per turn on it, why is the effect not once per turn? Why did my opponent activate the card effect like 3 times? That not very clear. You could unironically put once per turn on infinite impermanence, but just not list the card and nothing changes about that card. Kind of funny. But alright, keep going. What does Sword Soul of Moyi do essentially then? Alright, we reveal a worm, we summon a token, and then if we synchro summon with Moyi, we draw a card. Yeah, that's about all Moyi does, right? But we have all this text and also all these more technical aspects to Moyi that are relevant to other things, right? So if this card is normal or special summoned. So it has to be normal or special summoned to trigger this effect. So if Moyi is not summoned, this is not going to happen. Well, that might be obvious, but that is relevant for reasons. So if we have like a destruction effect versus a negate summon effect, negate summon effect would be better. So there might be a card like, for example, Root Kalos that says negate um, negate that effect and then destroy it. So that is sometimes relevant, depends, right? And then here you can reveal one Swordsoul card or one Wire Monster in your hand. This is going to be cost, so this is going to happen before Chain Resolution. And then special summoning the Swordsoul token is the effect here. So that's going to happen after during the chain resolves. During chain resolution, English. While that token is in the monster zone, the player who summoned it cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck except for synchro monsters. So this also states that it has to be in a monster zone. Doesn't say whose, and then the player who summoned it is the one that cannot special summon actually. So if you were to actually steal the Swordsoul token, then your opponent would still be locked specifically into synchro monsters, and they would not be able to perform a link summon. Not that I think this would be relevant a lot of the time, but this just simply means you can't lock someone into synchro summoning by giving them the Swordsoul token, essentially, right? But you will be locked under this, so you can't use the token to link summon, I guess. So you cannot link or fusion summon using the token that you summon off of Moyi here. So that's all that means essentially, but that that's like breaking the card down more, or we just look at it in general. And these specific kinds of rulings actually, of course, do matter. Just for example, though, if we go to Astral Kribo, let's say we're just teching in Astral Kribo for something and we're not playing purely an XYZ deck, right? So maybe we can just make a few rank 4s in our deck, alright? So Astral Kribo has this lovely effect. You can reveal one number Xyz monster in your extra deck, special summon this card from your hand, and if you do, this card's level becomes the revealed monster's rank. Also, while it is face up in the monster zone, you cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck except for a number XYZ monsters. You can only use this effect of Astral Kribo once per turn. A number Xyz monster that was summoned using this card on the field as material gains this effect, cannot be destroyed by battle or your opponent's card effects. So a lot of things to say about Astral Kribo. First off, this works differently from IB Masquerena. A number XYZ monster that was summoned using this card on the field as material gains this effect. So this effect can be negated by negating the monster. So let's say, for example, we make Dugaris. Dugaris would be not destructible by battle or card effects. It is still possible to like banish it and stuff, but whatever. Now, if we were to want to, let's say, negate Garce, that would work. So if we had infinite impermanence, that's fine. We can just imperm Garce, and then we would be able to destroy it because this effect here is negated. IP Masquerena does not work in the same way. IP Masquerena just makes the monster not destructible, period, right? Well, not period. It's not destructible by your opponent's card effect, still destructible by your own. If Link monsters link summoned with IP Masquerena as a material. That's how that works, I guess, right? And then here, this effect. If we special summon Astral Kribo, of course, the level modulation is Astral Kribo's effect. So if we were to negate Astral Kribo on the field, this would change Astral Kribo's level back to its original level. So in this case, level 1. Doesn't really matter what level we were trying to make Astral Kribo for our XYZ summon here. Let's say this happens. Can we link summon something with Astral Kribo? Or link summon at all? No, because this effect here activated in the hand and it finished resolving when Astral Creepo hit the field, the negate simply just undoes the level modulation. You were still locked by Astral Creepo. So, yeah, the type of like ruling on Moyi is not like necessarily going to matter, but as you can see here, for a different card with a similar-ish kind of uh block here, it does matter. But if we do remove Astral Creepo in the field, of course, same way as like essentially we just summon something from the extra deck with it, more or less the same as Sword Soul. This lock is gone, and we're able to do everything we were able to do before we activated Astral Creepo, right? So that's just the thing, yeah. And this is just one of the many interactions, I guess, that you have in Yu-Gi-Oh! That you just need to essentially somehow learn. Because it's not like super obvious, honestly. Uh, not super obvious at all. And I guess also worth mentioning is this effect is hard once per turn, but the second effect is not hard once per turn. The effect to gain effects is actually an effect of its own, and it doesn't care, like, if that makes sense. So if we go to Vice King Requiem, just for example, the the effect to give other monsters effects, you can only use this effect of DDD, DDD Vice King Requiem once per turn. But the effect over here is not once per turn, right? I believe. Let's see. Uh, a DDD answer that was. Wait. Oh no, wait. This only has one effect. Okay. So this whole thing is essentially one effect. So this has a hard once per turn. So if I have DDD, Vice King Requiem, and we special summon this, and then we make a guy, and then maybe we detach Vice King Requiem somehow, and then we summon back Vice King Requiem, and we use it to make another extra deck monster, specifically DDD one. Only one of them would have the effect to target a card on the field, shuffle, yada yada. This effect is once per turn, meaning you can actually use this effect here, not hard once per turn. So we could use this effect technically 2-3 times in the same turn. But to gain this effect, we would not be able to gain this effect in the same turn. We would have to resummon Vice King Requiem and use it as material multiple times over the course of a duel. So over the course of 3 turns, then we'd be able to activate the effect here 3 times in 1 turn. And that is also jank to think about, honestly. This is like a lot more prevalent in Vendread, where that matters, and where all of those cards have this type of like restriction as well. So that's just a thing, I guess. So more jank, and yeah, this essentially makes just reading the cards the most basic skill you essentially need in Yu-Gi-Oh! It's super actually complicated, and as you can see already, I've been trying to explain this for like 30 minutes, so that's epic. And of course, I'm not trying to like talk to new players here. I'm trying to talk to like people who know how to play the game already here, right? And you might have learned like a thing or two already, despite having played the game for a while. So now, as a new player, like a straight up new player, how are you supposed to fathom any of this? And how much reading would you actually need to understand all this? Like targeting, non-targeting, how they like work in a chain, because we're we're not able to just look at singular cards here. Like if we look at this card effect, we're going to also have to like take into account like several different cards, like cards that we don't necessarily even have knowledge of. Like, for example, let's say with this card, a set called by, when this would activate, when this would this card would activate, and then when Called By would activate, like this banishes for cost. So if you were to want to use Called By, you would have to chain Called By before, which isn't problematic because this will negate the effect of Spectral Sword, meaning um, it wouldn't actually matter if your opponent had, for example, like another Spectral Sword to activate, because that would not be able to activate either. But like if they had, well, I guess it wouldn't be Spectral Sword that super matters for this, but and general idea, if your opponent's card vanishes for cost, then you would have to called by it before it vanishes itself, so before the card activates. So like with a Phantom Knight card as well, same general idea. If you wait too long, the card will just resolve and you'll look like a fool. So that's kind of how that goes, and that's just another thing out of like the more billion rulings in this game and interactions. So just here's the fun one. Okay, so let's say we have Cyframe Gear Gamma. Okay, so everyone loves Gamma, surely, right? And then we have Evils, or I believe Lars, maybe Lagia. No, it's Lagia. Okay, so we have Lagia. So our opponent, when our monsters would be, a monster or monsters would be normal or special summoned, or a spell trap card is activated. Quick effect: you would be attached to materials from this card. Negate the summon or activation, and if you do, destroy it. So in this case, let's say we're normal summoning, uh, or attempting to normal summon. Let's go with something that has a trigger effect. So let's go with, once again, I guess, Moyi, because sure. So Moyi, of course, summons, reveals Worm, whatever. So we normal summon Moyi, and our opponent immediately will attempt to activate Logia. If our opponent does that, we're actually able to activate Psy from Gear Gamma here. But the interesting thing about this is this effect here. When your opponent activates a monster effect while you control no monsters, quick effect, you can special summon both this card from your hand and one Psyframe driver from your hand, deck, or graveyard, and if you do, negate that activation. If you do that, destroy that monster during the end phase, banish the face-up monster special summoned by this effect. So the thing we primarily care about here is that Cyframe Gear Gamma requires us to control no monsters. So we're attempting to summon Moyi, so Moyi looks like it's on the field. But is Moyi on the field? No, because its summon is being attempted to be negated, so technically it has yet to hit the field, and it is trying to hit the field. So it's technically not on the field, allowing us to chain Gamma. And this kind of thing would never be like super apparent, because actual Solemn Judgment type effects like this, where with like actual Solemn Judgment, for example, Solemn Judgment is a counter trap, which means you cannot respond to it, which is something we would also have to explain to newer players. In fact, everything I've been saying this video kind of at some point has to be like taught to newer players, but okay, whatever. So we have Solemn Judgment, and this just negates a summon, essentially. That's the effect we care about here. And this is a counter trap, meaning it can only be responded to by other counter traps. So, Cyframe Gear Gamma, or I guess we could go with the trap one. So we have, there is some trap kind of Cyframe. Which one was it? Beta, Alpha, Delta, nope, Epsilon? Epsilon, that's the one. So this technically can respond to traps, right? So if Solemn Judgment was just a normal trap instead of a counter trap, then we would be able to respond to it with Epsilon in the same way, but we would never be like super aware of this, because first off, who plays Epsilon? Secondly, Solemn Judgment. This would be a counter trap, meaning it can't be responded to by anything other than a counter trap. So the only card that would be able to respond to Solemn Judgment is like a set counter trap. So some counter trap that's already set that can respond to Solemn Judgment, or Red Reboot. So that's it. That's all you got. So yeah, this game kind of hard to explain like pretty fast. Another issue, right? So I don't think there's a super easy solution, but if we were to play a different game, like notably with I guess a game like maybe Hearthstone, all of the information on a card, you can look at it and it's a lot clearer, right? And that is because like even essentially things that have the same effect in Yu-Gi-Oh, they might be like nuanced enough that the effect works differently enough that it does matter, right? So let's say we have Dark Grepher here. Once per turn, you can discard one monster, send one dark monster from your deck to the graveyard. We might have another card that does almost the exact same thing as this, but it has a few differences. Like, for example, the discard is actually going to be an effect, and this means it triggers a lot of different things where Dark Griffer would not be able to trigger them. And then let's say instead of just uh, sending a dark monster from your deck to the graveyard, it might destroy a dark monster in your deck or something. So essentially, the cards will do the same things, but not really. And it will matter with some other things, right? So let's say we have a card that says any card, uh, any monster sent from from I guess wherever that would be sent to the graveyard. Any monster that would be sent to the graveyard would be banished, or would be sent to the graveyard. It is banished instead, right? So fissure. If we have fissure, but we detach as XYZ material, it does not get banished. So a lot of rulings like that. But if we were to instead have macrocosmos, which is pretty similar, XYZ material does get banished. This is actually relevant if you were playing Kishtira, believe it or not. So, yeah, very confusing and a lot of things to just go over. We could go over like essentially jank Yu-Gi-Oh interactions all day long, and you would probably learn like something new just through all of this, right? Well, yeah, pretty jank stuff we have going on here, and I guess let's throw in a fun one. So Muckraker actually has the generic ability to protect. If a monster you control would be destroyed by battle or a card effect, you attribute a fiend monster instead. So this is interesting because this doesn't work against Raigeki. And the reason being is because Muckraker itself is also being destroyed. So you can't actually send Muckraker to protect in this case. And Muckraker can normally protect itself. So yeah, pretty jank. This type of like ruling. Essentially, it boils down to, well, could try to explain this, but I don't think I'm capable. But if there's a monster that says it protects the field and it has to do something, specifically, it's probably something like send to the field, or not send to the field, send to the graveyard, like send a card to the graveyard. Like in this case, we have tribute a fiend monster. Perhaps it banishes itself. Those types of effects will not be able to protect. An effect like Dingirsu's, where it just detaches an XYZ material, would be able to protect. So if we have like Hugin, Muckraker, that type of thing, we get like Raigeki, you can't protect because the monster that would be doing the protecting, I guess, in this case, like cards that say banish itself to protect, insert other cards. So let's say we have Shinoi Spectral Sword and Dark Grepher. Oops. Okay, so we have Dark Grepher, Spectral Sword, and then Muckraker on the field for whatever reason. Muckraker would normally be able to protect these guys by sending itself to the graveyard because it is indeed a fiend monster. if you activate Raigeki, all three of these guys will be sent to the graveyard. And the messed up thing is this happens during resolution. So what would be really funny is if you had, for example, an even better board than this. If we have like Baron de Flor with Warlord Savage and Muckraker, if your opponent does Raigeki on you and you don't like negate it with Baron or Warlord Savage, you're just going to have a bad time, really. And then Muckraker will be destroyed alongside all three. Or yeah, alongside the other two, I mean. Yeah. So yeah. We could go on like this essentially, I guess it's been kind of a tangent forever here. But where exactly would you learn like rulings here, like this? There's a bajillion different rulings that matter for this and interactions that are not very super clear cut or easy to understand. And there are things you probably would never have seen before, like just flip to monsters not being able to be negated essentially, or flip face down monsters specifically, if that makes sense. And then there are like cards with card text that is essentially not used on like the majority of cards. So it's terminology you've never seen before. So it's not very clear what it means to you. So, for example, if we go to Prohibition, activate by declaring one card name. Cards with that original name and their effects cannot be used. Cards already on the field are not affected, including face down cards. So what does cannot be used mean? So you can't use a card as fusion material if it's declared. You can send it for cost. You cannot discard it for effect, probably. Or can you? I'm very confused. So, can you discard for effect? Maybe. But yeah. In general, Prohibition. Pretty confusing card. But it does a thing, I guess. So that's cool, I guess. If we did Prohibition declaring Fallen of Albaz, I believe Branded Fusion can't activate because it must use Fallen of Albaz as a material for it. So that's a thing, my guess. If we do, let's see. Another jank effect. Let's see. Let's go with this card. If we have this here, you can bash 8 Mekk-Knight monsters with different names from your graveyard and or face up from your field. Send your opponent's entire hand and extra deck to the graveyard. So this effect is pretty much not on other cards, but if we look at this effect, that this one at least is pretty clear cut in what it does. Pretty obvious, yeah. So we just banish these guys for cost, and then we do these two effects. So we know what send your opponent's entire hand and extra deck to the graveyard is, but then we go like this, and then let's see if I can find it. Not this one. Is it in the game? It would be funny if it is not. Okay. Is it this one? No. It might not be in the game. Or it might have been errated. But there is a penguin card that said something like, unite the deck, and then make a new deck. So, yeah, I guess we just won't talk about that card. Alright then. But, what the hell does that mean? And that was a card before problem-solving card text, so, interesting. If we look at Karibo, did Karibo get eroded or anything? Relink Karibo, wait. What the hell's a relink Karibo? No, Karibo. During the damage calculation, if your opponent's monster attacks, quick effect, you can discard this card. You take no battle damage from that battle. There's no way Karibo was like this before, right? Alright, quickly I will check if Kribo has been errataed. And let's see. Errata. Seems like it has been errata. So the original card text says, discard this card from your hand to make the damage inflicted to your life points by one opponent's monster 0. This effect must be activated during your opponent's battle phase. Discard this card from your hand to the graveyard, and let's see, how many erratas has this had? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8. So let's look at one errata back. During your opponent's turn, at damage calculation, you can discard this card. As cost, you take no battle damage from that battle. Um, okay. So before, it says you would take 0 battle damage from that battle. Uh, okay, I guess. So I assume there are other cards that have like an errata in here. So okay, maybe that card was errata and I just don't remember which one it was, but okay. So in general, cards are hard to understand, and that is part of like the charm of Yu-Gi-Oh! So that's not something that's really easy to change. So making it more like readable, at least like with what they've done with, for example, Kribo. I think that's fine, but I wouldn't really want this game to be dumbed down too much, and it's not really able to be dumbed down without like really ruining the game to an extent. So instead, I think it's just like we need better resources to kind of learn Yu-Gi-Oh! And that's just the primary thing. So if there was like a very clear-cut, obvious, good way to learn Yu-Gi-Oh! I think that is probably the way forward, just straight up. Because honestly, I didn't even fully explain the damage step and like damage calc and all the effects that can actually be activated there. Like with Link Rebo is pretty interesting, where you can actually mess up Link Rebo, and I bet a lot of Snake Eye players actually did mess up with their Link Rebo at some point. So I'll just go over this effect real quick. When an opponent's monster declares an attack, you contribute this card, change that opponent's monster attack to 0 until the end of this turn. If this card is in your graveyard, quick effect, you contribute one level 1 monster, special summon this card. So if we do, for example, let's say we have Dark Griffer and an 800 attack Apollosa. Our opponent has like a Snake Eye monster, as well as Apollosa. If I declare an attack with Dark Griffer onto Apollosa, then my opponent chains Linkribo, attributing to special summon itself. This will make me redeclare with Dark Griffer, and then I can just simply redeclare into Apollosa. I would have already declared an attack into Apollosa, so that means Linkribo actually cannot be activated because it's not on a redeclaration. It is only on specifically a declaration where you can activate Linkribo. So that would end up destroying your Apollosa in this case, where you could have instead, though, have simply just used this a little bit sooner, and then my Dark Griffer would not be able to attack into the Apollosa. So what would have happened then in this case is I would probably attack into the Linkribo. Linkribo attributes itself to prevent taking unnecessary battle damage, and then I will just not declare another attack. So that's all it would be, right? And yeah, that's kind of confusing. Don't even want to bother going into Linkrubo and Ultimate Leo Utopia Ray and how that interaction works. But yeah, that's all I got for you guys today. And hopefully we can take strides into like making better resources, I guess, and being able to teach people all the necessary information, right? So we have like forms of interaction, and then we have essentially just knowing what card text actually means. Because knowing what card text means and being able to read it are two different things. Like, if I just read all of Linkuriboh's kind of like card text, right? Versus like just understanding what it actually does and what it is capable of, right? That is also pretty important. Like, you could read this card like Cyframe Gear Gamma, and let's say we're actually not playing in a Master Duel. Would we be aware enough that we could activate Gamma against Logia here? Like, is this super obvious? Is this clear? Um, I'd say no, right? It's not that intuitive. At least if you're playing in on simulator though, it will show you like whenever something is activatable, and you might be thinking, "Oh wait, I can activate Gamma against Logia," and then you'll just do it, right? So that is another beneficial thing. So the more games you play in like simulator, the more you can like kind of learn about the game. So this is still just a pretty good way to play the game. So we have that going for us at least. So yeah, that's all I got for you guys today, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.